My guest Shawna is what I call a selfish survivor. Through therapy, she has been intentional about getting to know herself unapologetically. We all know that self-preservation is vital to our mental health. Today, we dive into Shawna's journey to self-preservation. We uncover her experience with escaping physical abuse.
A lot of self-doubt of like, I made a mistake. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was.
She shares her experience with building boundaries.
If I continue down this path, am I honoring myself and my comfortability?
And adjusting to a transitioning spouse.
My ex was transitioning from female to male the last 6 months of our marriage.
The topics discussed today are very sensitive and vulnerable. So if those kinds of things are triggering to you, please be aware. I think you're going to take a lot of gems from this selfish conversation. Enjoy.
So every morning, I make my coffee. Perfect. Oh, see, look at that foam. Ooh, that's hot. I don't like iced coffee. Like, that's a millennial thing. No, that's a Gen X, Gen Z. I'm a Gen X, but my time off. You can tell a definite divide between a certain age of people. Like, I want my coffee hot, I want it iced. So I'm a hot coffee person. It can be hot as hell outside, and I'm still gonna drink hot coffee.
I like to call you a selfish survivor, okay? And I call you that because on this show, my goal is to interview people who are intentional about taking themselves seriously, but also putting themselves first, and that's what that means. And we're gonna learn about your journey, but I know that there were a lot of things like mentally and emotionally that you've experienced, a lot of trauma, and then a lot of great things that you experienced. When was like the first time that you realized, like, if I don't start taking my self-care seriously and myself seriously, these things that are happening are gonna keep happening to me? Like, when was that moment for you?
I would say it was in July of 2020.
Okay.
My sister had shared this book while she was going through a divorce, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna listen to it. It was an audiobook. I'm gonna listen to it to support her. So if this is part of her journey right now, and when I started listening to it, it was the first time I had something where I could put words to what had happened to me.
Oh, wow.
And you know, you can tell people, a lot of times it feels very fantastical when you tell people pieces and parts of your life or whatever. I feel like it's unbelievable.
Oh, wow. Like your journey.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so to listen to this book was the first time I was like, oh man. And then that's when I sought out a therapist that specialized in that topic. And then that opened up the door for me to be able to deal with that topic in particular. And as I started learning things about codependency, I had shared, like, you can look at things and blame your situation and go, well, you know, I grew up with a mom who every man my mom was with beat the crap out of her, you know, and you can blame it on your situations. But what did I learn as a child being in that dynamic that now is contributing to my own relationship issues? I might not allow someone to hit me, but I cower and I make myself extremely small when there's conflict. And what I started realizing is that's called people pleasing.
Gotcha.
You know, like, I am a people pleaser. I like to think of myself as a recovering people pleaser, but but you know, it's not something to brag about. But that is what it was. I learned to do everything that I can to minimize conflict, which meant that then I didn't have a voice.
Right.
Or I would help people to my demise, you know, and it was truly reading that book around July 2020. I had been going to therapy ahead of that since November of 2019, but once that part hit, I started going to therapy 4 days a week.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to say, like, how did you know to go to therapy when you were reading? Like, how did you know that therapy was something that you needed to do while listening to that podcast? But you were already
it.
Gotcha.
Like, I needed help and understanding, because you're already, like, I was already kind of in this point of being in a shame circle, and I needed someone to throw a life raft down.
Oh my gosh.
And be able to grab it so that I didn't continue to spiral.
Oh wow.
So
Yeah.
having therapists, and I had 3 different therapists that specialized in 3 different things
Oh really?
that I was speaking to.
You know what? I wonder if that's the reason why sometimes people, which I don't even know if people realize that like you can have 3 different specialists. Like, what were the 3 that you had?
I had a sex and gender therapist, I had a narcissistic abuse therapist, and I had a trauma-informed therapist.
Oh wow. And they, oh my God, how did you, I can't even imagine stomaching everything that they're saying to me for me to improve myself, so I feel like I'd be overwhelmed.
Oh yeah,
Was it overwhelming?
at times, but like once things hit me, of just, number one, like with the narcissistic abuse thing, you don't feel believed when you tell people things. Unless you have been in a relationship like that, you don't understand. And it's built around a lot of manipulation, a lot of gaslighting, and you really learn to not trust your intuition. And so to have a therapist that specialized in that was extremely helpful to just feel validated.
Wow.
I had to learn how to validate myself because I saw a lot of outside validation. But she was able to help me with that. And then the sex and gender therapy literally started because my ex was transitioning from female to male the last 6 months of our marriage, and I wasn't allowed to ask questions.
Really?
And I was told that asking questions was me taking over their transition, and I needed someone to talk to that could understand and answer those questions for me, but also it allowed me to not feel like I was being what I was being told I was doing, you know, because there was a strong level of toxicity in that relationship as well. That person is not diagnosed narcissistic, but had strong narcissistic traits.
Yeah.
And so it was just another person to help me not feel like I was doing something wrong, you know, and it was a safe space. And then in turn, it allowed me to really kind of delve into my own sexuality and sexual abuse that I've had in my life. It all kind of correlated. Like, I might talk about something in this session that was touching on this thing here, you know, and I could start seeing the web of how everything was kind of interrelated for myself.
You talked about trusting your intuition. And I think sometimes when we're in those traumatic experiences, even for myself, and I've never said this out loud before, like I was on the brink of dealing with domestic violence. And in that moment when you're in it, it doesn't feel real, like similar to what you were saying before, like it doesn't feel real. And you don't know what to do. And if you're constantly told that, like, not to trust yourself, or people are like doing like certain things to you to make you feel like you shouldn't trust yourself and your intuition, you start believing that that's like a thing, and that maybe you're doing something wrong, like you mentioned. when you talk about like some of the physical abuse that you've been through, what were you processing and how did you like end up getting yourself out? Because I feel like that is really hard to do, knowing in your gut that you should be out of that situation, but not always ripping yourself out of it.
For me, I had to have an exit plan in place. And I think that once I got myself out, there is a lot of self-doubt of like, I made a mistake. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was. And so they say, and it is hard because in some ways you're like addicted to this person. And if you grew up with chaos, that feels very familiar.
Wow.
You know, and so
that's a good point.
They say to go no contact. And I mean no contact.
Right away.
Do not block them on everything. Like I got a no trespassing order. I was getting mail gifts delivered to my house and I got the police involved. Like I'm going, I can't believe I even have this in me to do this. But I took a picture of myself as a child.
Wow.
And I had that on my phone. And whenever I started feeling like doubt that I couldn't do something, I would look at that picture and say, what does this child need? And so me as the adult had to step up for this person. Even though this person isn't who was hurt in the situation that I was directly in, I had to stick up for that person. Wow. You know, as a child, when you're in these situations of abuse, you're dependent on your mom. You know, like what do you do?
Right.
You can't leave this situation. This is your mother. This is who's taking care of you. But I had to learn that as an adult, I can get myself out of these situations.
Right.
I do not have to stay in these situations. And so I would just constantly look at myself and say, you've got this. You're doing this for this person here. And you got to find that strength in yourself. And it is hard. I went 5 months no contact with my ex. And I broke no contact because we have stepkids.
Gotcha.
And it's just ridiculous because I got myself right back into something. But I was able to look at it a little bit differently, and I'm going no contact again. I'm pulling myself back out of it. And it was a lot of guilt. You know, they say fog. You're in a fog when you're in these situations. Fear, obligation, and guilt.
Whoa.
You stay in it.
Oh, it's an acronym.
Because of fear, obligation, and guilt. And so I would always look at the situation and say, what is it right now that I'm feeling? I feel obligated. I had 2 stepchildren.
Right.
I felt like I was abandoning these stepchildren.
Right.
So I broke no contact because I felt obligated.
Of course.
I felt guilty because I wasn't there. I had raised them for 5 years. You know, and then to get out of it and then see, because I educated myself on things, to see these themes of what was kind of happening and going, it's literally in the textbook. Wow, what is happening right now?
It's right there.
It's
That's
right
what's
here.
So crazy. It's like we read these super educated articles and textbooks and it's like, oh my God, like my life is happening in this book. Like what it's telling me is happening right in my face. And that is crazy.
Yeah.
It feels like an outer body experience.
Well, and this might seem relatable, but my therapist told me that I had a high pain tolerance for abuse.
Whoa.
Because of what I experienced in my childhood with my mother.
Oh wow, so you'll just keep you're with it. Wow.
Yeah, I just look at him like, well, it's not that bad. I mean, it's not like this prisoner that escaped from prison that my mom let live with us that beat and almost raped and beat her right in front of us. I mean, that's not happening to me.
Gotcha.
You know, you rationalize it by going, it's not that bad. Well, it doesn't mean that it's not bad.
Right, right.
You know, someone doesn't have to be beating you
Whoa.
to near death, you know,
Yes.
for it to be bad. So it's that high pain tolerance.